r/AskReddit. Couples whose wedding was an absolute catastrophe. What happened? I've told this story before on Reddit, but here are the bulleted highlights. So equals significant other. The wedding itself went off quickly and relatively smoothly. It was a really quick ceremony. It was before and after that were the problems. So stepmother told me at the bridal shower that he was never going to amount to anything and I was making a huge mistake. So stepmother brought her 2 young children to that shower, even after I asked her not to. I didn't know if lady friends would have games with sexual innuendo as I'd never been to a wedding shower before. So's brother brought an uninvited and unannounced girlfriend to the rehearsal and then demanded I include her in the wedding. I'd never met her before. They were from out of state and he didn't tell us in advance that he was bringing a date. The girl stood outside and smoked the entire time. So stepmother gave men in the wedding party money to take him out to a strip club and get a hooker. So's mother cried because we had not put together an intricate ceremony that she could participate in. Though we told her in advance it was better to do nothing than to try and include everyone. Stepmother/bio mother/my mom/grandmothers. So's brother came to my hotel room the night before the wedding, drunk and crying, because he and the new girlfriend got into a fight. He said she tried to stab him with a steak knife. He then told me I'd made a mistake and had chosen the wrong brother, lunged at me with his tongue out, and started groping me. Next morning, I walk out into the common area where people are having breakfast. So's father is there and begins to insult my family because of how cheap everything looks. My dad was sick and unemployed at the time, but Phil knew that, which made it more hurtful. I reminded Phil of this and the fact that I'd paid for everything myself. Ceremony goes fine. Hooray. Reception time. So stepmother insults several of my friends' looks as they are trying to eat. One of my bridesmaids is a woman with multiple disabilities. I worked for her and provided care for many years when I worked in social services. Groomsmen make fun of her and they ask why all the retards at this wedding. My grandfather sees a tattoo of a dragon through the back of my dress, proceeds to shove me and tell me the Bible says dragons are satanic/I'm going to hell now. My mother told everyone it was a good thing I'd gotten my own dress because there was no way hers could have been let out enough to fit me. I wasn't remotely overweight. Maid of honor's mother breaks down and starts crying when she hears Nat King Cole playing. Apparently it was her and her recently deceased husband's favorite song, and she is absolutely bawling in the middle of the reception. Maid of honor and I have to take her outside and calm her down while someone changes the music. The best part is, we had legally gotten married at a courthouse 6 months before, told no one, and only had the wedding because of our fucking families. The wedding was nothing as expected, but the marriage has been nothing but a blessing. It rained non-stop. The venue was outside with a gazebo type structure. We still held it there, just closer to the middle, so we wouldn't get wet. We had a low budget wedding, so no live band, just a DJ. We gave him the music for the first husband/wife song at rehearsal and all was good. Once it was time for the dance he played the wrong song 3 times until my husband had it and left me standing in the middle while he went to put the damn music himself. We hired a professional photographer and also asked our families to take pics with the 3 cameras that we had. We have a total of 10 pictures for the whole thing. The professional photographer only had 6 good pictures. Everything else was ruined for some reason. The pictures taken with our cameras were all ruined also. This was 17 years ago, so I'm fuzzy on the details, but all in all, we only got 4 pictures from those cameras. We were to stay at a hotel in the honeymoon suite and then the next day travel to our honeymoon destination. When we arrived to the hotel, around 1 in the morning I think, they had already given the honeymoon suite to a family because they forgot it was reserved, so we had to stay in a regular room. Edit, just to clarify, because a lot are asking, this is a third world country, very poor, and at the time we had just started rebuilding after a long war. Customer service was non-existing, technology for the pictures was really bad, So it was a very different time/place from what we would know as normal now, or what we would expect now. At the time, if things went sideways you tough it out and move on. There was no compensation, refunds, or anything like that. Not my wedding but my parents'. I wasn't around to experience it, but their friends and family still talk about it to this day. The main culprit was the heavy rain that caused minor flooding and tons of road closures. Mother was very late to the church. My father broke down convinced that she was going to be a no-show. Not only was the taxi that was taking her to the church late due to road closures, it also managed to hit her as she was running to get in, causing a small rip and minor staining on her dress. A few members of the bridal party were so late they completely missed the ceremony. At the hotel reception, the DJ could not figure out how to get to the venue due to road closures and being unfamiliar with the area. The first half of the reception was basically quiet until the groomsmen found that the restaurant in the hotel had a jukebox. The restaurant let them move it to the banquet hall where they paid quarters for music. Almost half of their guests did not come, again due to the rain. The hotel was understaffed due to the road closures, so food took a very long time to come out. A guest who must have been literally dying of hunger helped herself to the wedding cake prior to it being cut. It really sucked on the day, but now they look back on it and laugh. Whenever we are at a wedding now, and the bride is on the verge of tears due to things not going perfectly, my mom will always say, "Don't worry about it. I got hit by a car on my wedding day and everything still worked out." Lol, that kind of ended on a fairly wholesome note. The DJ took the money and ran, went out of business, and didn't bother letting me know, so we played iPhone music on a little speaker all night. There were two separate fires, a grease fire from the catfish being fried on site, and a fire from the fireworks set off at the wrong time, right after the ceremony, when it was still light out. Although if they'd been set off at night, everybody would have been too drunk to put out the fire, so I guess that was a good thing. It was about 20 degrees warmer than usual for the season, so I was absolutely dying in my very elaborate dress, which wasn't finished until 2 days before the wedding, because the seamstress was fired and nobody at the boutique bothered to check on her work until my mother swept in and started kicking ass. That entire chain went out of business a year later. I ended up hating most of the pictures. The photographer was not very creative, and I ended up having to direct her for most of the shoot, which was exhausting. Bonus, a hurricane hit our honeymoon destination the day before we got there, so it was pouring the entire time except, of course, the day we left. On the other hand, people still tell me our wedding was the prettiest they'd ever been to, and the actual ceremony was the most moving experience of my life. I would do so many things differently if I could, but a wedding isn't a marriage, and my marriage is pretty great. Many years ago I worked in the wedding industry for 5 years. Video. Here's a snippet of disasters. Mother of the groom got really drunk and fell onto the wedding cake, caught on camera. Best man went to the bathroom, took his wedding ring off to wash his hands, left it on the counter. Not even a minute later he went back in, and it was gone. Never found it. Only family and friends at the wedding. Mother of the bride spilt liquid foundation down the front of her all silk dress before they left the house. Had to wear a different outfit. Wedding reception set up an entire wedding for approximate 400 guests with the totally wrong color scheme, flowers, and food. There was a wedding the next day, and unbelievably the bride and groom of that wedding had exactly the same names. First and last. Bride and groom were on their honeymoon, came back and found their house had been broken into, every stick of furniture taken, every gift taken, every wall broken, sinks ripped out and glass smashed. Police found out it was the ex-BF of the bride. One bride, unfortunately, miscalculated her monthly cycle. Got out of the car at the church and This reminds me of my brother's wedding. My mom's shoe broke the morning before the wedding. I took off driving around a strange town looking for a store that was open to get replacement shoes for her. I was the hero returning with a pair right before the wedding. In the box were 2 shoes for the same foot. My poor mom wore 2 right/left shoes for the entire wedding. Also, my brother and his wife had planned their dream wedding. Many members of her family are SVPD with their own +2, 3, 4, etc. Instead of telling these people no, they had to upsize to a far less attractive space in the hotel, shell out a ton more money for food, and then a huge amount of her family no-showed, leaving the reception being a huge, half-filled room with people spread out far away, and half-empty tables. Obligatory not me, but intro. One of my oldest friends got married at the Renaissance Festival, as is very befitting of her. If you know her, I was the mom and road tripped for 2 hours with the rest of the bridal party, maids and groomsmen, split across 2 cars to the fairgrounds. We were told beforehand that tickets would be waiting for us at the box office, and all we had to do was tell them who we were with, and we'd be let in. No such tickets existed. Despite being in 2011, only a few people in our group had phones, but it mattered little, since reception is terrible at the festival. We called and called and called the bride and everyone in her family, but we got no answer even on calls that did go through. All the festival employees would do is confirm there was a wedding taking place that day, but would not give us the name, and refused to even go check to tell the bride that her entire wedding party was stuck outside. We sat outside in the courtyard entrance for about 2 hours as the time of the ceremony ticked dangerously ever closer. Finally, with about 20 minutes to go, I spotted a white shape storming across the courtyard towards us. It was the bride, in her dress, and with rollers in her hair. Somehow word had gotten to her about our predicament and she came to resolve the matter herself. She gave the employees at the gate holy hell over the matter, and we were all rushed inside with the thinnest apologies you can imagine from them. On top of all of that, it turned out she had paid for the bridesmaid's hair and makeup to be professionally applied, something there was now no time for. Half of the bridesmaids showed up with bedhead and no makeup at all, and that's how they entered the ceremony. I managed to put a sloppy, vaguely medieval looking braid circlet around my head as we walked to the backstage area where the procession was to begin. Given the location, it was requested the bridal party, men and women, dress in kind. Not the worst thing in the world, really. I was in college at the time and cash was scarce, but given that the bride and I have been friends since age 10, and I was a mod, I wanted to make the most of it. I spent $60 on a deluxe medieval princess dress from Target, just happened to be around Halloween, so score, with approval from the bride. It wasn't exactly Game of Thrones quality, but neither did it immediately look like something I bought on the relative cheap. The rest of the bridal party didn't put as much effort into it. They too seemed to do their shopping from the grocery store after Halloween clearance bin, and it was a sea of crushed velvet, plastic swords, polyester blends so thin they were see-through, and one pirate costume. A high school production of Macbeth would have looked better. The ceremony went off alright, even though regular festival goers kept poking their heads in. At the reception, the groom tried to be funny and smashed the cake into the bride's face, and it smeared her lipstick and somehow fell off the spoon and down the front of her dress, inside and out. It left a spot of an unfortunate shape and color down her bodice that her mom and sister desperately tried to get out. The whole thing was interesting. 5 years and 1 baby later, the husband suddenly up and announced he wanted out and they split. So, yeah. Okay, not the level of catastrophe you're probably looking for, but here goes. The wedding was supposed to be a small family gathering. The restrictions, no children and only bring 1 guest, were the subject of bitter fights, and, ultimately, us relenting on both points as the date drew nearer. The child who was the source of the most contentious of these screamed and cried through the vows. The wedding was to be a beach wedding. We rented out the presidential suite at a hotel for the reception and had the exact spot on the beach picked out. Every day for weeks preceding the wedding, the weather at the time of the ceremony was perfect, 70 degrees and a slight breeze. With the ceremony minutes away, the wind kicked up to high enough speeds that the sand on the beach was whipping up so violently we couldn't walk across it, let alone have the ceremony as planned. We therefore had to move the ceremony into the suite we had reserved for the reception. The move of the ceremony was complicated by the fact that we were unable to check into the room until about 5:30 p.m. when the manager of the hotel who, until that day, was a friend of my wife's, had promised us an early check-in so we could get set up. My mom went into managerial mode and started getting things set up, but the room was still pretty much a mess at the time of the exchanging of the vows. My wife's brother is addicted to pills, and in his opioid-induced haze, lost the rings. During the ceremony, officiated by my sister, her bosom popped out of the dress my wife specifically requested she not wear. The place we ordered food from just gave most of our food away. My wife's mom was to be the one to go pick it up. She took the receipt and the emails we had exchanged about the order. When she got there, they apologized and offered to remake the portion of the food they sold to walk-in customers. She accepted, and 2 hours later, she arrived to the reception with food, where everyone was pretty wasted from the absurdly strong drinks my father-in-law was making. The only food they could have eaten in the meantime had been seized upon by seagulls. Hotel maintenance showed up later on in the evening because the folks in the room above us let their bathtub overflow, and they wanted to check to make sure there were no leaks in our room. There were, so the most accessible bathroom was unavailable for a while. This was September of 16. So, of course, a heated argument took place about the election. The hotel oversold for that night, as is customary, I know, so my aunt who cannot walk did not have a bathroom in her room that was handicap accessible. She had expected a beach view, and instead, looked at a wall. Not technically part of the wedding, but I learned I had been laid off in the middle of our honeymoon. Edit. Forgot to mention my dad forgot to bring pants. We got married during a hurricane, and boy did shit really go sideways. We had no power. When I woke up, I had to drive around town to find a place to take a shit due to being on well water. This was after a rehearsal dinner consisting of BBQ and beer, so it was an urgent matter. The venue did not have power until about 90 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start. Downed trees blocked the road to the venue. A massive 50-foot tree fell on my in-laws' roof that morning. We were blessed no one was hurt or worse. A family member showed up fucked up on pills or something, and my brother had to make her leave. The maid of honor, my now-sil, forgot my ring, and then froze completely when the pastor asked for it. Another bridesmaid quickly passed one of her rings down the line as a stand-in. It didn't fit. During the after party at the hotel, my sil's date accidentally shot himself in the hand. He had to go to a trauma center in a different state at like 3 in the morning. He's doing okay now, made a full recovery. To add to all this, my wife's parents are divorced, both remarried, and absolutely do not get along. I think this was the first time all 4 of her parents/step-parents were in the same room in years. It was stressful beyond belief, but my wife and I will always treasure the memories of that hectic and crazy day. The best part was after the ceremony the storm had cleared and my wife and I watched the beautiful sunset that follows a big storm. It was a perfect metaphor to the start of our life together. It wasn't mine, but a friend of mine. They were young, 21 to 23, when they got married, so the parents pretty much paid for the whole thing. They wanted a nice intimate wedding, so the bride started planning, over 1 year, for a wedding with about 40 to 50 people at this beautiful outdoor venue. Cost $120/head. 3 months before the wedding the bride and groom's parents had a change of heart and decided to invite nearly 600 guests and the bride and groom were told they don't have a say. Her mom went and picked out a different dress than what the bride wanted and had her aunt tailored it. It didn't fit right at all but she didn't know her dress was changed. The venue was changed to a community center hall, a large basketball court with those plastic picnic tables with cheap plastic sheets on top. Guests were told to arrive at 6:30. The event started at 8:30. We had to help them unfold tables and set up the chairs and table pieces. The caterer was a small corner shop Jamaican restaurant that did not bring enough staff to serve everybody. They stood at the base of each row and the guests had to pass down the plates of food. Dinner was only served at 10:30 p.m. They ran out of food, so they asked guests that had leftovers on their plates that were untouched to be walked back to the kitchen. The DJ was their cousin from the Philippines who barely played any English songs. The bridal party had not seating because the venue was booked saying it was a get-together, not a wedding, so that the parents could save money. The bride and groom requested no speeches longer than 3 to 5 minutes. There were at least 4 uncles. That went on for about 20 minutes. They forgot about their first dance, and the bride's older sister, Mom, who was 11 years older and unmarried, got so jealous that she got drunk and told the bride how she is marrying the wrong guy and kept telling all the guests the same. Luckily, true love prevailed and the couple is happily married, 2 kids in, both went back to school and got their degrees and are settled. But the wedding was definitely the worst I've ever been to. Obligatory, not my wedding, but my cousin's wedding. She and her husband booked some fancy old Gilded Age type mansion up in Yonkers, we are from New York City, for their reception. She really wanted to impress, so they hired a live band and had a raw bar, among other things. This wedding cost well into the 6-figure range. Keep that in mind. Well, let's start with the weather. It poured. Thunderstorms. The outdoor area, where the reception was supposed to be, was mostly grass, so it all became mud, which forced everyone into the 2 small dance floor area. There were 3 dining rooms, so guests really couldn't go back to their tables comfortably. Oh, and the place was not air conditioned, and it was the end of the summer, so it was absurdly humid. But, you can't control the weather. Also, this happened. So how about the venue itself? It was still under renovation, so guests were further restricted from accessing areas, just to alleviate the congestion from the crowd. The bridal suite upstairs was stifling, cramped, and full of clutter from the ongoing construction. The power went out 2 to 3 times during the early part of the reception, so that was great. Surely the cocktail hour was going to be decent? Nope. Literally a few cold cut platters and vegetable platters. For almost 300 people. But the dinner? Family style. Serving dishes of food were actually taken away from in front of me because, as the staff said, we have to share. The facilities were equally fantastic. Men's room had a stall and 2 urinals, and ladies had 1 stall. And the ladies' toilet broke, forcing everyone to use the same bathroom about 3/4 the way through the night. There was a hotel about a mile down the road where many people had booked an overpass stay. They've worked with the venue before, so things should have been fine. Of course, they weren't. One of the 2 shuttles broke down, so it took the better part of forever to get to the hotel. My car was at the hotel, of course. Lucky me was in the bridal party. But the hotel. Surely the hotel was your escape from this horrid event, liquid soap enthusiast. Sadly, it wasn't. My girlfriend, now wife, and I arrived to see my aunt, mother of the bride, flanked by 2 drunk and angry relatives dressed in suit pants and wiffle beaters, screaming at the front desk because her room was apparently one of a batch that were overbooked, so she suddenly had nowhere to stay. Mercifully, my room was okay. FYI, a relative gave her and my uncle their room while they found someone else to bunk with for the night. My cousin never mentioned her wedding after that night. Ever. Epilogue. The happy couple. Divorced. He was working on Wall Street, but had always wanted to go into the FDNY. She knew this for years. He got in and took a huge cut to his fairly substantial salary. Her 6-figure salary wasn't enough for her, I guess. So, she cheats on him, leaves him with their son, and severs contact with her extended family. Last I heard was that she came out as a lesbian and is marrying into a very wealthy family. My wedding was a disaster. Most of what went wrong was that we hired a college student to do the bartending. He came with a recommendation, so it's not like we just picked a rando. Anyways, our wedding wasn't super big, about 50 to 60 people. We had the bar set up for him before he got there, and when guests started to arrive they started asking for drinks. Apparently this overwhelmed him, and after 15 minutes he just left without telling anyone. My husband is from an affluent area, but me? I'm mountain folk. All my friends and family are mountain folk. Never leave mountain folk alone with a bar full of liquor. They all started making their own drinks, and within 45 minutes we were completely out of hard alcohol and everyone was completely hammered, which led to a lot of other problems. First, a good friend of mine, we shall call her Rachel, gets really wild when she drinks. As I was walking down the aisle she literally pulled out her boob and flashed me while yelling "yeah." My father, who is a pervy old man, took her behavior as an invitation, and after the ceremony made it his goal to get down her pants in front of my stepmom, which led to my stepmom crying, my stepbrother yelling at Rachel, and Rachel's boyfriend then getting in a fist fight with my stepbrother. During the entire evening we had several guests puking where they shouldn't and passing out in rooms that weren't part of the wedding. Behind the scenes our caterer was 2 hours late and showed up stoned out of his mind. We ate 2 hours late, which really didn't help sober anyone up. But I will say, when it did come out it was some of the best damn food I have ever had. My husband and I had enough by 9 PM and snuck out the back without saying goodbye to anyone. We laughed the entire way home about the shit show we had just witnessed. Overall, we should've just eloped, like we wanted to, and while our wedding day was a wreck, our marriage is wonderful, and tying the knot with him was the best decision I have ever made. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.